the idea of you take a company that's so community based and connected with a company that's health based, that becomes a really powerful tool for changing lives, right? Essentially. Um, and there's probably hundreds of other potential partnerships or things that could happen where, just introducing people to metabolic health and then taking the next step of like, okay, now you've been introduced to it. Here's how you can improve it. Here's how you can monitor it. Oh, and here's a device that you could use that could be significantly impactful in monitoring it. That becomes really powerful.
Couple things to focus on. It'd be good to go through your backstory as a founder, talk
Mhm.
about that journey and the path to what you're doing now with RareBreed. But I think there are three big pillars to dive into, and that's this idea of access and opportunity as it
Mhm.
pertains to health and wellness, funding, and talent opportunities, because they end up being analogs for a lot of the same reasons. And so it'd be
Yep.
good to chat through your lens on it and how everyone can work towards creating more opportunity for underrepresented communities, underrepresented founders, and basically everything that you're doing from a capital allocation perspective. So, with that said, why don't we go let's go all the way back to the first time that you remember being exposed to what you know now as metabolic health. Were there things growing up that you look back at and you're like, "Wow, that really has led to these downstream implications of what you're seeing now transpire as poor metabolic health within your community?"
Yeah, the first time I was exposed to the idea of metabolic health was probably when I was diagnosed as diabetic, right? And even then, I don't know if they used that term or if that was a thing as much as it was when I started like learning more and diving into it and trying to educate myself. The crazy part about it was like I was in my 30s when I learned what that was or what it meant. I grew up where whatever mom made for dinner was it. You know,
Mm.
pastas, breads, your carbs, your starches, all that. And at the same time, I came from a family where on both sides of my family, being a diabetic was a normal thing, right? Um, don't know how much of that was contribute to genetics or to the food we eat, but I wouldn't be surprised how close it was to the food we eat. And so, becoming aware of my health was always like surface level of, what's your weight, counting calories. And even then, somebody who's large, I've been large my entire life just about, right? Since I was about probably 8 or 10, I've been a heavy set individual, right? And I've had, bouts with, weight loss and yo-yoing and weight. But when I found out I was diabetic, I started to really try to get serious with it. But it can be difficult, right? Because like diets suck, and you try all these different programs and supplements and things, and it can be hard. For me, it's been hard, but it's something that I'm trying to get better at and smarter at. And I think the real cool thing about levels is it gives you a real time gauge, right? It's not just pricking your finger and seeing what your glucose level is in the moment, but like connecting it to the food you eat, connecting it to what you're doing, almost like a video game. I'm now wanting to always manage to get those right numbers, right? Like I'm always trying to hit my numbers, right? And I
Mm.
have an opportunity to see like what things in my life and what things in my diet help me hit those numbers. Um, so that's been really incredible.
So when you're growing up, you're
Mhm.
exposed to all these things that gave you this lens now that looking back, you're like, "Oh, that has led to this." What are some of the analogs when you think about your first journey as a founder? So, what led you to that, right? Where you said, "Hey, I wanna go be a founder." Like, the irrational thing that everybody does and goes, "I'm gonna go try this thing," which is the right thing to do, but what was it that led you initially to be a founder and then to be a founder again, and then to get on the other side of the table where you said, "Hey, instead of building, I'm gonna go and help people to get funding to do all of the building, to have these access to opportunities." What was it that initially led you down that path?
It's all serendipity, right? Like life is about these moments and connections you make. And so when I was in school, I got an internship with the Department of Defense, and I was in this program. And within that program, it's like the student program, I met this gentleman by the name of Patrick Jackson, who's a great friend of mine, who was the first person I ever met who was obsessed with becoming the black Mark Zuckerberg. That's what he wanted to be, right? And so for context, this internship I was in was nothing but electrical engineering and computer science major. So it was a bunch of engineering geeks. And this dude was like hell bent on being the next or being the first black, big startup founder. And granted, we didn't call it being a startup founder, right? Like we didn't have the language for it. And so I got to watch him, like for context, like iPhone comes out in '07. He makes his first iPhone app in '08. Like he's one of the early pioneers in app building, right? It's kind of crazy to think of. And so like we watched him like make these apps and start making money. And then one day he tells us he's quitting his job. His wife is pregnant and he's moving to San Francisco because some guys who used to work at Google gave him some money to build more apps. We didn't realize he was leaving to go to San Francisco to start a startup and that he had got money from VCs. Like we had no concept
Mm,
of what those terms were or what he was doing, but all we saw was here's a good friend of ours who has the same skill as us and he's able to build products that can make money. And it's like, well, we can do that. And
mm,
so really my foray into being the founder was just the starting part was me and two of my best friends decided to start a website that we thought could make money while we slept. And like we built this product with no customers. We're like, okay, well, how do we get customers? It's like, well, we need to do more marketing. Well, we don't have money for marketing. Where we get money? Well, there's these people called investors who give you money that, if you use their money, you can get the marketing, get customers and all this. And so like that starts us down the pathway of taking this cool website that we had built and realizing, oh, this is a business. We should treat it like that. And so then it's kind of spun out of control from there, right? Went from like just building a cool website at night to like, oh, we need to put effort into this and make it more. And I wake up one day and now I'm the CEO of a startup and I'm trying to get into accelerators. I'm trying to pitch to investors and I'm learning all this stuff. Like we didn't know what any of this stuff was. And so like we just kind of stumbled into it. Right. And so that's how the first company happens. And we ran that for 4.5 years. We were lucky enough to sell it off or sell the IP of that company off. And through that 4.5 years, we go through two accelerators. We live in San Francisco for a while and we learn all of it. Right. My first company was like going back to school. It's like going to school and learning how this works. And I had the bug, when the first company ended, went straight to building my second one. And the second one was not successful, right? And so but that was my foray, and I didn't realize what I was getting into. Like if I knew then what I know now, I don't know if I'd ever done it.
mm,
Right? Like being a founder is so hard. You go through so much. But I didn't know that going in. And we were just bumbling around in the dark, just
mm.
like fumbling over stuff, and like we just got there. Um, and so, that was how I got in. I got to be a founder. What made what the genesis of it was. It's really ignorance. Um, and then breaking into venture was unique in that I thought I could do venture, and I thought venture was interesting, but I didn't have a pathway, right? So like I drop out of college my junior year, so my third year of school I drop out. I then go on to be an engineer for the government. I then start these two startups. I don't have a college degree or a finance background, right? But venture's interesting. But after my second company, I end up getting a job at a marketing firm running their technical team, which was not exciting, not what I wanted to do. And after being there for a year, I quit because they got a client I didn't agree with ethically. So I just quit on principle. Had no plans, didn't know what I was going to do. And I quit on a Friday. And the very next Monday, I got this email from the state of Maryland. It's this community wide email from the state of Maryland saying they were hiring a new fund manager for their state ran fund. And I called one mentor who I knew worked at that organization, asked him if he thought, I could do it, or I thought that I might have a shot. He gave me the most like bare minimum bit of encouragement you can give. Like, trying new things. We're looking at a lot of people. Like, no reason for you not to apply. And then I ended up writing my first ever cover letter and applied to that job. And it was the only job I applied for because I just knew I was going to get it because I'm a crazy person. And 4.5 months later, I did. Right, like I broke into venture by accident. I
Mm.
broke into entrepreneurship by accident. Right, these were not things I had expected or even planned. Um, and man, what a great ride it's been.
One of the things that's interesting is going back to having the model, right? Having your friend that you looked up to, right? Having somebody that gave you the lens into like, what's this thing? And like, can it be done? If you didn't have that, right? Because people's experience becomes a byproduct of what they're surrounded by. And so without that, what do you think things would look like as far as if you didn't have that example that put forth like, "Hey, I can do that too." Like, I'm no different. Like, I can do that. Like, there's actually a way. Like, it's kind of like you need the insight to be like, "Whoa, I didn't even know this thing existed." What do you think that would look like if there wasn't that foundation there? The reason I ask is right now, everything that you are doing with RareBreed, everything that you're doing working with founders and just being helpful, like generally just being helpful, you're setting an example for other people. Like you're leading by example and you're setting this foundation for other people to be like, I can do this too. Like I've got the insight that this is possible. So how much do you think that played a role in the influence in you actually becoming a founder, you getting into VC? Do you think it was like a critical path?
Yeah, I don't think it happens if I don't. Right, like at the time, I was, you know, working in these government contracting companies. I had already started to like bump up against like the top end range I could make at a as a mid level or even senior level software engineer in those organizations. And so I was like starting to plan on like, okay, how do I progress in my career? The next steps of progressing my career were to break into management, which I was starting to do, become a project manager and then start to move more into business development and bringing in business to these organizations. Like that's where the money is made. So like I done just did the corporate job thing and spent, 20 years at a Northrop or a Booz Allen or an Accenture or something like that
Mhm.
and did, relatively okay for myself. But I wouldn't have been exposed to so much because like he exposed me to this idea of we as software engineers were builders. We could build products that could solve problems that people would pay for. Being an entrepreneur exposed me to the world of opportunity. Like I didn't realize just how many things you could do in the world and how many limits we put on ourselves. Like the ways that people can make money, there are like so many ways to make money that you would never consider. Or the idea of like, when you go to school, nobody ever explained to me why Ivy League schools were so different or so important, right? Nobody explained to me that, like, I should apply to Ivy League schools. And, like, let's forget Ivy League schools. Nobody told me I could apply to the University of Tokyo
Mm.
or to Oxford, right? Like, think about, like, what is the thing that holds you back from doing any of that? Nothing. There's literally
Mhm.
nothing stopping you from applying, right? And or the idea of like, I want to go spend 2 years and work in Singapore. I was a software engineer, could work anywhere.
Mhm.
But like, I didn't have the even concept to think on that level until I became an entrepreneur and I'm meeting people who all they do is spend their time thinking about wild and crazy things,
Mhm.
doing wild and crazy things, coming from wild and crazy backgrounds. It's
Yeah.
like, wow, that's interesting. You can do that? That's a thing? You can live there? you're going to try to do, you're going to try and change the world by doing what? Like, and so that was probably the most amazing thing, was just being exposed. And so yeah, that's what it is. It's really just getting the exposure in life. And like that's where I'm coming from, growing up in Baltimore, I wasn't getting that exposure. Those weren't things that people in my community talked about. And and I was supposed to be one of the smartest among us, right? I went to the best engineering schools, and I was always in the best classes. Even when I went to college, I was an honor student in college, right? Nobody was talking to me about those type of opportunities, those type of things. Nobody was explaining to me how the world could work. And
Hmm.
so yeah, being exposed to things really changes the world. It really changes your world. Same thing for like health. Being exposed to the different types of things that affect your health and why change your outlook on life.
How can we as a society start to break down this disparity that exists? Everyone's working towards this idea of, let's create more access to opportunity. Let's create more access to knowledge. Let's break it down so that there aren't these walls, right? Where it's like you don't know the opportunity didn't exist. Like until you saw it, you're like, oh yeah, me too. Like I can do that. But it's like you needed that nugget. So what can we do, like as a society? What can we do to break down these walls and to eliminate the disparity with access and opportunity when it comes to things like health and wellness, when it comes to things like talent, when it comes to things like funding? Is it setting up more examples like you, where you become a catalyst for change? But what else can we do as a society to work collectively towards, like, breaking down disparity? Because it's such a barrier.
It's a huge barrier, and I think the way you get there, I mean, one, having folks that you can highlight and put up and let people see, that it's possible, I think is important. But I think as a society, as a whole, it's really the lack of this information being disseminated into all communities, right? And really what that means is that this information needs to become part of culture or part of pop culture, right? Like if you want to disseminate a prevailing theory, you push it out through pop culture,
Hmm.
right? You push it out through, or you have a very direct edict to share the information, right? Like all of us remember the commercial, "This is your brain, this is your brain on drugs,"
Mhm.
right? Like that commercial became a pop cultural moment, right? Because you just saw it so much and it was so like in your face.
Mhm.
Well, let's flip that around and say we have some kind of campaign around metabolic health, some kind of campaign around talent, a campaign around different types of jobs, a campaign around how you get a high paying job even if you only have a high school degree, a high school diploma, right? Like where do we have the artists, the athletes, the individuals who, when they do things, become pop cultural moments to then share what they're doing? Like the fact that Serena Williams has Serena Ventures,
Mhm.
there's going to be a lot of her fans who may not even be sports fans, but who are fans of her, namely Black women and women in general, who are going to learn about venture capital because she has a venture fund,
Mm.
right? And so then what does it look like with Serena's next tournament? She wears an outfit that has Serena Ventures on it,
Mhm.
right? Or even better, it has Serena Ventures on it and also 776 on it, which is her husband's venture fund. All right. Um, and those kind of things lead to now, oh, now Serena's on Good Morning America talking about being a VC. Now people are going to learn what it means to be a venture capitalist, what being a VC is. It may feel unattainable because Serena's the greatest tennis player of all time, right? So now it's like, okay, I got to become the greatest tennis player of all time to be in this world. But at least now you're talking about the world, right? You're
Mhm.
talking about what it is. And then what if there's a campaign talking about here are all these up and coming investors or who are talking about asset classes, right? The idea of learning about asset classes when you're young or in pop culture. Well, now we start breaking down barriers and meeting people where they're at.
Mhm.
And that's the biggest thing, right? What I've learned is that people who are exposed to these types of information from their home communities then take that on and know what their options are in the future.
Mm.
And those who come from communities where we don't communicate about these things, well, then you never have a shot because you never know it exists. And so, how do we get all these different communities sharing this information? You got to meet them where they are.
Yeah, I love that, and you highlighted this example earlier, the idea of spreading education, and we'll call it education and attention importance with things like health metrics. So understanding what your blood pressure is and what's happening in Baltimore right now. And I don't know if it's happening in, I'll make an assumption. It is happening in other cities, but where um, people can go into barbershops and they'll get a discount on their haircut if they get, I think it was the blood pressure and I can't remember the other one, but if they get certain health metrics taken, so that that becomes the starting point, the foundation of meeting people where they are, that is the bridge into these micro communities where you say, cool, if we just take, let's go back, like, let's actually play devil's advocate on the, this is your brain on drugs, right? That's sort of this macro campaign that we just assume, like, hey, this works, like everybody sees this and everybody, it resonates with everyone. But the counterexample is saying, instead of giving these blanket strategies and saying this is going to work, this is going to resonate with this community, whether it's women who are going through menopause or young Black men, very different in the approach, right, of how you might think about that. And so that example you gave of how barbershops being integral to the Black community are a catalyst for providing the first steps of becoming, of highlighting the importance of health and wellness. It's such a cool example of meeting people where they are.
I think so. You know, and like for me, when I think about change, change has to go from top down and bottom up. I don't think either one works well in a vacuum. I think you have folks doing the work at both ends helps you get to a point where you get to meet in the middle, right? And so the idea of you can go into a local barber shop and if you want a discount, like you can get a discount on your haircut if you get your blood pressure taken and get your glucose taken, right? Just so you know, right? And if they have like on the wall, like here's healthy levels, here's dangerous levels, you might find out that you might have diabetes because you
Mhm.
took your glucose level at the barber shop.
Yeah.
That's wild. Or, I think there was a barbershop in Chicago where they were giving young kids discounts if they would read a book out loud while getting their haircut,
Mm.
right? Promoting literacy, right? Like those kind of things are happening in institutions that are integral to a community, right?
Mhm.
Because everybody goes to the barbershop, everybody goes to a hairstylist,
Mhm.
right? And so, like, that's a something like that's an easy way to meet people where they are in an unusual place,
Mhm.
right? And so I love seeing things like that, and I think we'll see more creative things like that in the future. I think we need to reimagine how our communities interact with the products around us,
Mhm.
especially the products that promote education and health, right? It can't just be in your doctor's office and it can't just be at school because we already know like that's not getting us where we need to be.
Mhm.
Like there's already a disconnect. So what are the gaps where we can fill in? And there's so many startups making so many products and so many tools. There's so many of these like box kits that you can get in the mail where it's like take a drop of your blood or take a urine sample and mail it in and we'll send you back results. Before the only way you'd ever get that's from your doctor,
Mhm.
right? Imagine if you come into your barbershop and they got a whole list they got like 5 things you can do. You're like, check your colon, check your mineral levels and vitamin levels, check your glucose and your A1C, check your blood pressure, and get that all done at one time.
Mhm.
Like now you're talking about barbershops becoming, health and wellness centers.
Mhm.
You know, I tell kids like, hey, if you want to go to the movie theaters, if you want a discount to the movie, go take these 5 health checks. That's that's interesting.
Mhm.
They have I remember reading an article about in Germany, you could pay to get on the train, or they have machines where I think it's like if you did so many jumping jacks or so many push-ups, you get a free ride. Imagine how many people would getting free rides in New York,
Yeah.
right? If
Yeah.
it's like, hey, do 10 squats and you get a free ticket. There'd be a lot of people doing a lot of squats every day.
Yeah.
Just promoting healthy living without even thinking about it. Those kind of things can be powerful.
Yeah. It's the idea of using behavioral economics where possible, but also, like, to change habits, to make behavior change over time. But it's also this idea of you, like, everything you're doing, you are conduit of trust, right? Like, you provide an element of trust that people go, "Yeah, I'm gonna listen to that." Like, you're a model, right? And I think the same thing goes with the barbershop. So let's use like you said, school, doctor's office in schools, right? Maybe schools a little bit more because if you're in school and you, like, let's make some assumptions. Somebody's in school, there's a teacher that they look up to that is truly influential in their life, and um, they see that person as a role model. They see that person on a daily basis. That is a different relationship than maybe a health practitioner that's like, you see that person once a year for 5 to 10 minutes. Like, the relationships can be so different, so the level of trust. But the idea with the barbershops, whether it's reading a book, whether it's checking glucose levels and taking blood pressure, it's and then everything you are doing too with entrepreneurs and funding, it's this element of being the conduit of trust. And I think sometimes there's a misconception in approach that people say, great, we're going to go educate, let's use air quotes, people. We're going to go educate people in general. And the way we're going to reach people, anyone in society, is we're going to come up with a bunch of material and we're just going to push it out through, assume just using digital platforms for now, we're just going to push it out and it's going to be the silver bullet. Like, there you go. Here's the material. And the problem is that it's not that effective because let's take different groups of people. So we're trying to educate uh, people in an older demographic. Well, pushing out content through digital channels might not reach those people because they're not spending a ton of time. Like, regardless of breaking down different segmentation, just saying people in older demographics might not use technology as much, you might not be reaching them. The same thing goes once you start to segment into different communities. And that's why the barbershop idea, or using these pillars as conduit of trust to reach people where they are, to meet them where they are, is such an interesting model to think about how community can be so impactful in helping to spread a message, whether it has to do with being a founder or wanting to be an entrepreneur, or understanding, as you mentioned with Serena, understanding that there's this world called venture capital and, like, I can access it too. Like, there's some 13-year-old girl that looks up to Serena right now and is like, what? I've never heard of this. What? And it changes the trajectory of her life, right? That is very interesting to think how we can use community to make meaningful change over time.
Absolutely. And I think that's the big thing, right? Like, and I think that's the advantage that startups have, is the ability to be part of the reimagining of how we, share this information with communities, how we help communities, how we impact communities. Because the startups, like literally what startups do is they break rules, right? Like things you used to only do in your doctor's office, you can now get in a mail order kit. Like that's insane,
Mm.
right? The idea of you used to have to prick your thumb to get blood to check your glucose levels. You now can put a device on your arm that's just constantly checking it. And then you can put a data layer on top of it to give you like real analysis of that. And as that gets smarter over time, you're going to start to be able to check all these different things that are happening in your body.
Mm-hmm.
There exists a world where you're going to be able to watch one of these smart device watches on your arm, and you're constantly going to be able to check where your body is and how your body responds to the environment around you.
Mm-hmm.
The idea you'd be able to tell the difference of how your body responds when you're in home versus when you're in your office will be incredible, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we've heard stories of people being in offices where there's mold or asbestos and not knowing for years. What if you had a device on your arm that was letting you know, like, every time I come to work, my blood pressure gets elevated. Every time I get to work, I got these things going off in my body that don't make sense. That's the kind of level of information we've never had before,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And like levels is being part of that wave, and that's why I'm so excited for what you're building.
Yeah, it's like it's the same idea we use often. It's like imagine you had to like go to the back of your car, you go to the back quarter panel and you're like, I'm just gonna have a look inside to see how much gas is in the tank. Like never mind all the other sensors in your dashboard that's like, oh man, like the engine failure. Oh, the parking brake's on. Like we have sensors where our vehicles, all of these things, all these devices that we're around at all times are giving us constant feedback, but our bodies, it's just sort of this black box of anonymous stuff happening in there. Like no one really knows. It's like, am I okay? Well, I went to the doctor and got my knee hit with that little like knee hammer, and I'm okay. That's what I was told. Like, and I'm being totally hyperbolic about it, but the idea that we don't really know what's going on at all times is wild to think. One of the things to dig into is with access. One of the challenges that any new category or new piece of technology has is access from a price point, right? So when DVD players came out, when flat TVs came out, they were whatever it was, 10 grand, 20 grand, like just an absurd amount of money. And right now we're sitting in this place where levels is inaccessible to many people because of the price point. Not just levels, sorry. CGM as a piece of hardware. It's incredibly expensive. Like $199 a month for CGMs is expensive. And so the goal is to help people understand how food affects their health and to give them that level of insight. But when price point becomes the barrier, and then you start to break it down to different communities where within the US, the Black community is the community that's affected the most by metabolic syndrome. And so you go, wow, there's like, you start to have a larger gap because of things like average disposable income. And again, it gets back to this idea of disparity. So what are some things that we, again, back to society and as a company, what are some things that we can do to start on that path of education in addition to things that are already going on organically, like the barbershop initiatives, like how can we provide the level of education, provide the level of insight, start to provide more access so that we can achieve our mission, which is helping people to get healthier, helping people to make meaningful behavior change. It doesn't have to do with like, oh, great, we have a whole bunch of people using CGM. That's not the goal. It's so people can go like, man, I'm not Skittles. What? I'm not eating that again. That's insane because they saw some data or they read an article or they whatever it was. But that's our goal. Not to dunk on Skittles, but like we kind of have to. It's the it's like total digression. Skittles is the worst air quotes food, if you want to call it that, in our entire data set as far as metabolic response on average. So anyway,
Interesting information.
yeah.
What I what I would say is part of that is time, right? Like, as companies start off, they very much start off with a premium product and work your way down, right? As you're solving for, whether or not the product work, how well it works, you're also solving for materials, and over time, those materials get cheaper, right? It's how Tesla goes from the Roadster to the Model 3, right? Like,
Hmm.
it takes time to do that. The other thing, though, is in the meantime, is working with community organizations that have the means to subsidize some of this,
Mm,
right? Every city and every individual community has their go-to philanthropy organizations that care very deeply about things in the city. And those things are typically around health, education, and wealth creation or job creation, right? Those are like four pillars. You can find a nonprofit in every single city across the country that they care about. And it's partnering with those organizations to subsidize or doing campaigns with community organizations like um, the Urban League or the NAACP, or with even large meetups like, let's say, Lesbians Who Tech,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being able to be part of these organizations where you sponsor or the organizations subsidize these products for members of their community, and especially as we move into an era of community driven marketing, right? We're seeing so many of these startups, especially in the Web3 space, where everything's community driven. It's all about the community.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then how do you help your community? Or maybe it's partnering with a DAO, right? Where
Mm-hmm.
there's some community based DAO out there where for every member of the DAO, they'll also get one of these devices, right? Like this is a health minded DAO, and one of the things we're going to do for everybody who participates up to a certain level, you will get one of these devices to help you better understand your own, like things like that. Creative things like that become interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You start your own program, like, hey, if you're a barber shop or if you're a hairstylist, we will give you X amount of these devices to give out every month
Mm-hmm.
as a way to, almost like the Tom's model. For every two or three devices we sell, we're going to give one to a community to
Mm-hmm.
use for one of these community based projects, right?
Mm-hmm.
Things like that, coming up with creative ideas and solutions, and really probably, having like a small think tank. I'm like, hey, let's get like 10 smart people in the room or in a Zoom and let's just talk through like creative things of how we could do, or, do what the government does sometimes. Get a couple writers, get a room of four writers or five writers, like write up just stories of how you think communities could use this. Well, become as creative as you want to be. Just think of the kind of ideas and thoughts and stories you would come up with. Like this is the kind of thing the governments use sometimes when they're trying to figure out like what are ways that other governments might plot against us. They'll get a bunch of writers
Mm.
and have writers come up with stories because they're going to come up with the wildest, most craziest, off the wall things. But that's where you get some really gems of like, oh, that is a blind spot we had, or that
Mm-hmm.
is, security risk we had, right? Well, let's flip that on its head. How could we use the same kind of, ideas to support communities and grow communities?
Mm-hmm.
It's just all about being creative. It's all about being different. It's all about meeting communities where they are and where are the pockets of money in these communities that can support, products even when they're out of their financial reach.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you're framing it too. The idea of working with. I think that's a big challenge. Is sometimes the intent is there, right? So people have great intent, and they'll say, "Cool, it doesn't matter the community. We're gonna work with whatever community. We're like we want to. Let's use the lesbians in tech. That was one of the examples you gave. We want to do whatever it is, and then people start to ideate." And they come up with this grand plan and they're like, the big reveal, here it is. But they failed to work with the community to design it from the ground up. And so they missed the lens on exactly what you're saying. Like, without talking to you, bringing up something like the barbershop initiative, the naive thing to do is to go behind closed doors and start ideating with a bunch of writers, right? And then you present this plan and it's like, oh man, if you tweak it this way, like flip it on its head, here's a different approach. It's like you miss that step. There are so many ways that let's riff on the barbershop idea as an example. How can tech companies work together? Well, again, totally riffing on it. Levels partners with Squire because Squire already has the infrastructure into barbershops. They've got the level of trust, they've got the buy-in, and then you can do maybe it's not the CGM model where it's like buy one, give one, but you break it down a further level and say, what is accessible? Well, doing finger pricks, like the same way that barbershops are currently doing. Like it's a very interesting model to say these are micro steps that we're taking to create more visibility into this mission, this education.
Absolutely, and the way you framed it, like What if Levels partnered with Squire? That would be incredible,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Not saying that's something that has to happen, or we're saying it's going to happen or anything, but like the idea of you take a company that's so community based and connected with a company that's health based, that becomes a really powerful tool for changing lives,
Mhm.
right? Essentially. Um, and there's probably hundreds of other potential partnerships or things that could happen where, just introducing people to metabolic health
Mhm.
and then taking the next step of like, okay, now you've been introduced to it. Here's how you can improve it. Here's how you can monitor it. Oh, and here's a device that you could use that could be significantly impactful in monitoring it. That becomes really powerful.
Let's talk about this last aspect that, again, it comes down to there's disparity, but there's also ways of creating more access and opportunity from a talent perspective. What can we do? What can companies do in general to create more opportunities for underrepresented communities?
Being more intentional and deliberate by allowing these communities access to open jobs, right? Um, Open jobs, and then also resources on how they can be trained or get to the point where they could do those jobs, right? Like you don't need to spend 4 years in college to work in the HR department, right? You
Mhm.
don't need to spend 4 years in college to be a social media expert. You don't need to spend 4 years in college to be a compliance expert. You don't need to spend 4 years in college to be a software engineer, as we've learned from all the boot camps, right?
Mhm.
Imagine if you take because in every city they have these organizations that help train up those in the community with different hard skills and soft skills, right? What if you work with those communities, like say, hey, we have a need for these type of engineers or these type of positions. Here are some resources. We would love you to add this to your coursework. Be more hands off as an organization, as a company, because you still got to grow. You got to do what you do, but allow people from different means and different economic backgrounds to now have the opportunity to gain a skill and get a job at a pre-IPO company.
Mhm.
Like getting a job at a pre-IPO company literally helps families create generational wealth,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
But typically, the only way you learn about those types of jobs is if you're already in the circles, or you've already worked at one of these companies before, or you have a friend who works in one of these companies, right?
Mhm.
We have companies in our portfolio where their first hires of color came from my personal network. Well, the only reason those individuals got a chance to even know to apply to those companies is because I told them to,
Mhm.
right? These companies just putting out their job boards, which typically go through like their investor network or their social media network, never gets to the communities that I come from. Because the communities I come from don't talk, going back to what we talked about earlier, don't socialize the idea of working at these companies,
Mhm.
right? We hear Facebook and Google. We don't hear about Level Health or Main Street or Rebundle or, any of the companies in our portfolio that are doing incredible work that I know plenty of people who are more than qualified to work at, but they just have their corporate day jobs,
Mhm.
or they don't have access or the potential to be, to own stock or own equity in the businesses they're working for. So all they
Mhm.
have is, their 401k.
Mhm.
You know, Being an employee at Levels pre-IPO, you're going to get some stock options, along with a great salary, along with post IPO, you get to say, hey, I was one of the first X amount of employees at this company. I watched it grow from 100 employees to 1,000 employees, and I'm happy to help another company get there.
Mhm.
That puts you in a completely different stratosphere as you go and progress in your career. And
Mhm.
so, one is like making sure that those opportunities are shared far more broadly, whether it's through folks like me or having even liaisons whose that's just what their job is to do. And
Mhm.
then also sharing resources with those community activists and evangelists and educators to say, hey, share these resources with your communities, help them learn these skills. This is the next wave. We're not going to have all the construction jobs and administrative jobs going forward. And even if you're going to have administrative jobs, they're looking really, what an executive administrator was 10 years ago looks vastly different today.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And like, here are the things and skills they need to know. Um, it's not about, knowing Excel. Now you need to know Salesforce. Now you
Mm-hmm.
need to know Workday. Now you need to work now PeopleSoft, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
let's make this help the community get there. Um, so those kind of things I think about.
Yeah, I think it's a matter of the nod. Like sometimes people just need the reassurance to be like, "Yeah, you can do this too." Like they, as you said, it's like people they know of Facebook or know of Google or know of. If somebody's into tech, they might know of like Main Street, right? They might know of these companies that are earlier and not as prominent, but they need the nod to be like, "Yeah, you can do this too." Like, what do you? Is there anything stopping you? Go apply, right? Kind of like you got the nod from your friend that was like, where it was a nod in the sense of like, yeah, do it. Just like do it. There's literally nothing stopping you. And you're like, as soon as you ask yourself, you're like, I guess, yeah, there really isn't anything stopping me. So it's the nod and the reassurance that gives people the nudge in the right direction.
Yep.
And it's one of those things that with that cue, that starts to spread because, as you said, somebody goes and they work at a company that they go from, they're in the first 20 employees, and the company goes to 500, and they saw all of these different growth paths. And then they can go and they can help other people, and they become the model to help other people learn and say, yeah, you can do it too. It's such an important foundation that we can't miss. The other important thing that's happening from a societal perspective is the outlook on remote work, right? So somebody can be outside the valley, but let's drill down even further. So there's all of these different there are all of these different tiers. So we've got the tier 1 cities like the New Yorks and the we'll call it the Bay Area. We've got all that maybe lean into tech a little bit more, and then we start to get Buffalo and Baltimore and Philly. We get all of these other cities, and you can drill down one more layer. Like, what's stopping somebody in East St. Louis from being a knowledge worker? Literally zero. But the challenge becomes the nod, right? The challenge becomes they need. And the reason I use East St. Louis is one of my friends is from there originally, and he lives in Atlanta now. But when he goes back, he's kind of like the guy that everyone's like, well, I can't be that guy. And he tells all his friends, and he's like, there's no reason you can't. Like, there's literally no reason you can't. Like, just because I don't live here anymore doesn't mean I'm any different. Like, we all grew up together. And so he's trying to spread that message to his friends that you can do anything you want. And now the removing geography as a constraint makes such an impact. And it's a matter of spreading a message for within communities from the ground up so that it can get further and wider.
Yeah, it completely changes the paradigms of things, especially, it used to be, hey, I have access to the opportunities within, an hour drive of my house.
Mhm.
Anything beyond that, I can't do. To now, as remote work becomes more prominent, now I have access to any job in the country that I can do from my home or I can do from a virtual office. That completely democratizes access for work and the type of work. It used to be, yes, if you're a startup, we want you to start your company in San Francisco because this is where the concentration of talent is. This is where concentration of money is. This is where concentration of talent is. It's no longer true. This is
Mhm.
where concentration of money is, but like, talent can be dispersed. Like, you can find the best talent anywhere. If I find an amazing coder in Idaho, he can code all night long from Idaho. I don't care as long as he's getting done the work we need done. And then we have the ability to get on a Zoom call and be able to interact. And then maybe once a quarter, we'll fly them out to the office, and so we can actually have some FaceTime and grow as a team. That changes, the idea of talent. That also changes the idea for startups and companies where they start not having to move.
Mhm.
If you start in your local community, but you realize the talent that you're looking for isn't local, if you have a hard time getting people to move to you, you no longer have to pick up and move to where the town is. You can be like, okay, look, if you don't want to live where we are in East St. Louis, that's okay.
Mhm.
You can stay wherever it is that you are, and we can still get this work done.
Mhm.
That's something that we weren't able to do before. And now we're able to do it in mass. So I'm excited for the future.